Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on a Friday. I hope you guys are having a great start to 2026. Today, we're going to be talking about the latest injury report for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they get ready to take on the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC North Championship Game being held at Acrisure Stadium here in Week 18 in the regular season finale. Obviously, this week is for all the marbles. A win and you're in the NFL playoffs this year with a home playoff game against likely the Houston Texans. A loss would mean the season is over. So obviously it's going to be a really big week here on Sunday. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Pines and I are going to be going live 2 hours before kickoff on Sunday Night Football this weekend. It all starts at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on Steelers Talk. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button and join us live on Sunday night. But today, what we're talking about is the latest injury updates for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, so you guys know exactly what the deal is heading into Sunday night. We'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers side here, of course, with T.J. Watt, who said today that he is good to go this weekend. He says he's excited about playing and that he doesn't hold any hard feelings about what happened at the team facility about a month ago, where during a dry needling session from a team professional, he got a partially collapsed lung. Now, the good news is, obviously, he doesn't feel any animus towards the Pittsburgh Steelers as an organization. This is the team that just signed him to a massive new contract. He loves playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's said it's his goal to play just for the Pittsburgh Steelers in his career, and the Steelers have expressed that same interest in keeping T.J. Watt here until he retires. And especially over these next several years under this new contract, he's going to be able to play for this team throughout the next chapter of his career. But obviously he's missed the last 3 weeks. The Steelers defense, I think, did a really good job showing up while he was out. Obviously you lost last week against Cleveland, but over the last 3 weeks, this Pittsburgh Steelers defense with Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and the whole collection of players here has been able to hold down the fort, and they played pretty good football here over the last month or so, and I'm looking forward to what this defense can look like with TJ Watt back out there. Now, I do expect a very controlled workload for Watt on Sunday night. Obviously, I don't think he's back to 100% at this point, but I do expect Watt to be somebody that can play probably at least 50% of the snaps on Sunday night. Now, you do have Alex Highsmith, you've got Nick Herbig, guys that, can get full-time starter workloads, have had those workloads throughout the season at times. And, I think because you've got two guys of that caliber in Herbig and Highsmith, you feel comfortable giving Watt a little bit more of a reduced workload than maybe what he's used to. And I think that's perfectly fine with me. I've been advocating for pretty much a three-way rotation between Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig whenever they've been healthy. I just think it makes sense to keep these guys fresh. I think it makes sense in that regard, and especially with Watt coming back from a partially collapsed lung, I think it makes even more sense to play Nick Herbig more than you would normally if Highsmith and Watt were fully healthy. So I think that, I'm not really expecting this defense to go to another level necessarily. I think this defense has actually been playing probably its best stretch of football of the entire season the last month. And of course, in 3 of those games, Watt wasn't on the field. So I no longer think Watt is as important to the success of the Steelers defense as he once was in previous seasons. But I do think that having a game-changing type of player like TJ Watt out on the field can certainly help the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, especially in those critical moments when you got to have a big play. I think TJ Watt is more than capable of providing that big play with the Pittsburgh Steelers defense this weekend. Now, to keep you guys updated on the rest of the injury report here this week, also, we know that Isaac Seumalo, Calvin Austin III, Brandon Echols, and James Pierre, all 4 of the other players that have kind of been limited throughout the week, all of their injury designations have been cleared. So the Steelers actually have a completely clean injury report for the first time in many weeks, probably since the early portions of the season where the Steelers don't have anybody with a questionable or out designation on their practice report. Now, obviously, you got players on IR, right? Daniel Ekuale, Darnell Washington, etc. There's certain players that are out for the remainder of the season. Broderick Jones, but all the players that could be available for this game outside of DK Metcalf, of course, who's dealing with a 2-game suspension. Everybody else is good to go, and it's all hands on deck for the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously in the most important game of the year to this point. And, it kind of sucks that you didn't win last week against Cleveland, because you could have gone into this week with a little bit more, not necessarily a nonchalance, but a little bit more of, we can give Will Howard a chance to play, and we can give Caleb Johnson a little bit more playing time, etc. But, obviously from this point forward, every game that the Steelers play is the most important game of the season. And we are officially in must-win territory, or officially in the point in the season here where the Steelers have to win games, and the next time they lose, the season will be over. So to have, Seumalo, who has been so big for this team as their starting left guard this year, has played some really high-end football, to have him back will be very nice. And this offensive line in general has played very well. Especially in the second half of the season, in my opinion. Then you get Calvin Austin, the third back, as well, and with DK out of the lineup, getting Calvin back in the lineup hopefully can give this team a little bit of speed and a little bit of playmaking that they were missing last week versus the Cleveland Browns. And then to have Brandon Echols back so that you can put Jalen Ramsey back at safety, don't have to deal with Chuck Clark in the starting lineup this week, and get Echols back in the slot with Ramsey back at safety. That should allow this secondary to play its best. And then with James Pierre back, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Asante Samuel Jr., because Asante's been playing, and he's been playing okay. He hasn't been playing stellar, since he took over the starting job. But, Pierre really was playing at a high level before he got injured. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of rotation they've got between those two, if there's rotation at all. They might just start Pierre, or they might just start Asante, and then the other one will be sitting on the bench awaiting a potential injury. Hopefully that doesn't happen, of course, but I definitely think one of the bigger questions heading into Sunday night is who is going to start at the number 2 outside corner position, because we know Joey Porter Jr. is playing, and he's their number 1, but is James Pierre or Asante Samuel Jr. going to be the number 2? We don't know the answer to that question, at least not right now. But just to talk about some of these storylines here with some of these guys coming back, how big of a role is Calvin Austin III going to have in this week's game? Because his role has been decreasing as the season has gone on. And before he hurt his hamstring, right, MVS and Adam Thielen were both getting more reps than him. And now Scotty Miller got over 40 snaps last week against the Cleveland Browns. So with Calvin getting back from this hamstring injury, where does he go in the pecking order? Is he part of the top 2 guys? Is he a part of the top 3 rotation? Where exactly in the pecking order is he? And with him being injected into the starting lineup again and into the rotation, what does that mean for Roman Wilson? Do we even see Roman Wilson this week? Because with Calvin out of the lineup last week, we only saw Roman out there for 9 plays and never got targeted. So, with Calvin getting more playing time this week, assumingly, and he's definitely going to be getting a helmet, I would assume that means Scotty Miller's playing time will decrease pretty significantly. And if Scotty's role is getting diminished, I would only assume that also means Roman Wilson and his role is going to be diminished probably to close to nothing in this ball game. And, I can't say it would necessarily shock me even if Roman Wilson is a healthy scratch once again and doesn't get a helmet. Now, personally, I would want to play Roman more because in a game like this where Baltimore, is going to play very aggressively, they're going to play a lot of single high, they're going to play a lot of man coverage, probably, just like they did last time back in Week 14. But back in Baltimore, DK Metcalf was kind of the X factor in that game. He was the guy that Rodgers could turn to in those one-on-one situations down the sideline and throw the deep passes to. I don't really trust MVS at this point in the season. That's not really what Adam Thielen does. And I think with the remaining wide receivers on your team, Roman Wilson, out of the rest of the crop that the Steelers have, has done the best at getting open down the field on those go balls, on post routes, on those types of plays. Now, there's obviously something between Roman and the coaching staff, or Roman and Rodgers here, where there's just not enough trust there to put Roman, who is still a very young receiver, out there and in a regular season game kind of setting, let alone with the season on the line. So something tells me we're going to see, once again, a lot of MVS, a lot of Adam Thielen, and then probably a lot of Calvin Austin III. That's probably the starting trio that we get from the Pittsburgh Steelers at the wide receiver position. But, if they don't play Roman Wilson at all and they give him no opportunities, I think that's going to be a missed opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I think with his 4.3 speed and with the way he's gotten open on some of these deep routes this year, he might give you your best chance to be able to burn the Baltimore Ravens defense down the field. But unfortunately, I just get a feeling here that they're not going to use Roman at all on Sunday afternoon. And then when it comes to the cornerback position, obviously the big question is James Pierre versus Asante Samuel Jr. Personally, I would go with James Pierre just because I think James was playing at a higher level than Asante has been playing over the last several weeks. If Asante was like the best corner in football or whatever these last 3 weeks, then yeah, you probably keep him in there. But I think Pierre was actually playing slightly better than Asante Samuel Jr. Has been here over the last few weeks. And also Pierre is bigger and he's longer. He's more physical. So in a game where you're going up against a behemoth of a running back in Derrick Henry, I think in terms of tackling purposes, run support purposes, I think James Pierre probably helps the Steelers out a little bit more from a matchup perspective. It's not to say I think Asante Samuel Jr. is a bad player or anything like that. And I will say, if I'm starting Pierre this week, I'm keeping him on a relatively short leash. And if he's given up multiple, big completions in the first half, and you got to switch it up a little bit, I would not be afraid to switch it up and put Asante out there in the second half if need be. But I think Pierre has played at a slightly higher level than Asante Samuel Jr. has this season. And with Pierre back in the lineup here, I think it's his starting job heading into this Week 18 matchup. But let me know what you guys would do down there in the comment section. Should the Steelers play Roman Wilson? Who should they start, James Pierre or Asante Samuel Jr. at CB2? Let me know your answers down there in the comment section. And we'll finish up today's show here with the Baltimore Ravens injury report, and Lamar Jackson is going to be a full go. He's been a full participant in practices all throughout this week. So much for Mike Florio's reporting here. Remember, we started this week of coverage, guys, with Mike Florio saying TJ Watt was a long shot. Lamar Jackson has a less than 50% chance to play. And then Lamar has been practicing in full all week. And then, it's been pretty much reported since Tuesday that Watt was going to play in this game as well. So big double L there for Mike Florio and his quote-unquote reporting. But in terms of the Baltimore Ravens, they have 2 veteran starters that are questionable to play. They're both sick and dealing with illnesses. So we're hoping that, they can, recover from those illnesses or whatever. But just keep in mind here that Marlon Humphrey, who's actually talking some crap about the Pittsburgh Steelers earlier this week. He is dealing with an illness, and he is questionable to play on Sunday. And then Rashad Bateman, who's been dealing with an illness all week, is also questionable to play with an illness. So just keep those 2 injuries in mind here as we head towards the regular season finale on Sunday night. And I'll finish today's show, guys, with just some thoughts, heading into this matchup. I'm sure I'll probably get in front of a camera again tomorrow, talk a little bit about the game and some of the storylines and stuff like that. But it's going to be nice to have TJ Watt back this week. But I think obviously the big storyline for the Steelers and whether or not they can win this game is whether or not the offense can get something going in the passing game. And, this could be the week that all of a sudden MVS explodes and has a fantastic week. But we could also see a situation where MVS gets targeted a lot like he did last week and just not show up. And if that happens, it's going to be really tough for the Steelers to come out with the victory, in my opinion. They're going to have to find a solution on the outside, on the perimeter, somebody that can hit a deep shot or two, whether that's Calvin Austin III, who we've seen be a deep threat for the Steelers at times this year, whether that's Roman Wilson, who we've discussed can be somebody that can get open for you down the field. Both of those guys are 4.3 speed guys. Whether that's, really diving into the intermediate game and attacking the seams with Pat Freiermuth and Adam Thielen. Whether that's, really diving into the screen game with Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell. There's certain things that you can do to get creative, try to take advantage of the Baltimore Ravens' aggressiveness, because it's coming. Without DK Metcalf out there and with the way this passing attack looked last week without him, any competent defensive coordinator would be going into this week with a plan to be very aggressive, to get after the Steelers, and prevent the deep shots down the, or not prevent the deep shots, but to invite them, take away the underneath stuff, take away the short stuff, and force Aaron Rodgers to beat you deep with this kind of collected band of wide receiver talents that haven't really established themselves as legit number 2 receivers at any point this season. So you're going to need a team effort without DK and Darnell Washington out there in the passing game. I'd say that's probably the number 1 X factor. The second X factor is whether the defense can stop Derrick Henry and the Ravens' run game, because the Ravens are averaging like over 250 yards rushing against the Steelers in their last 3 games. Now, you were able to hold Derrick Henry to less than 100 last time, and Keaton Mitchell was really the guy getting the explosives against the Steelers in week 14. So they did a decent job at bottling up Derrick Henry that last time around. And then another reason why you should have some confidence maybe in the Steelers being able to stop King Henry this week is because Derek Harmon is going to be back. Obviously Harmon was not on the field the last time we played the Ravens. This time he will be. And, his impact on the Steelers' run defense has been quite significant, as it's been well documented. So I actually think there's a pretty decent chance the Steelers corral Derrick Henry. I also think Lamar Jackson will be a big X factor, because the reports coming out of Baltimore is that he feels as good as he's felt all season long. The practice report, this is the first time in a long time, definitely since before their bye, where he's had a week where he wasn't a limited participant in at least one practice. He was a full participant throughout the entire week, which hasn't happened in a long time. So, what version of Lamar Jackson do we get? Do the Steelers have a better plan to take away Zay Flowers than in week 14, where he put up over 120 receiving yards? All these questions are going to be questions that need to be answered for the Pittsburgh Steelers come Sunday night. And, if they want an opportunity to earn themselves their first playoff victory since the 2016 NFL playoffs at this point, almost a decade now, they're going to have to earn that opportunity. They're going to have to get a sweep versus their arch rivals in the division in the Baltimore Ravens. They're going to have to do it against a running back that just put up over 200 yards against the playoff team, with what Derrick Henry did against the Packers last week. And, the offense is going to have to do it without, their number 1 receiving weapon. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a fight. I expect it to be pretty low scoring. I expect it to be, cold in Pittsburgh on Sunday night, and it's going to be a classic AFC North showdown. That's probably going to come down to 1 or 2 plays in the fourth quarter in crunch time. Can Aaron Rodgers, can TJ Watt, can the key Steelers players make the plays to get the victory? That's what this game is going to all come down to, guys. And I can't wait to share it with you and react to it together on the Steelers Talk Live watch party. Again, guys, that's going to be on Sunday night starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, nearly a 2-hour pregame show. Then during the game itself, we got live play-by-play and analysis of the game itself. And then we've got post-game reactions. So whether the Steelers win and they win their first division championship in a half decade, and they're getting their first home playoff game in a half decade, and we're celebrating, or whether the Steelers lose and we're reacting to the end of the season. It's going to be an interesting evening on Sunday night. You're not going to want to miss it. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.